With Russia planning to move troops into rebel held regions of eastern Ukraine and perhaps rebel held claimed areas of eastern Ukraine that they don't control, how would a full scale war in Ukraine reflect on Biden's presidency? Joining us now to discuss are CNN senior political analyst and the author of Lincoln and the Fight for Peace, John Avlon. And we also have CNN global affairs analyst and author, The Man Who Ran Washington, The Life and Times of James A. Baker III, Susan Glasser, with us. To you first, Susan, what is at stake here for Biden?
Yeah, I mean, this is undoubtedly the biggest international crisis of Biden's presidency, and really of any in the last few years. It's an outright challenge by Russia, as we heard yesterday from Vladimir Putin in that extraordinary speech, basically defying international law, blackmailing a neighbor, blackmailing all of Europe, with the notion that an independent country on his borders is not a real country because he thinks it should still be part of a Russian empire.
And John, you say this isn't just important when it comes to Biden's presidency, it's also important for the trajectory of the 21st century. What do you mean by that?
What I mean is that, Biden's been very clear that one of the challenges of our times is this issue of democracy versus autocracy. Which way will the world trend in the 21st century? And if Putin is able to menace a democratic neighbor and essentially erase its sovereignty through aggression, through fiction, through troop movements, that is an existential crisis for the international order. And that's why for Biden and Biden's presidency, this is so critical. And why it's a real test of whether democracies and multilateral organizations can hang together as a counterweight to these autocratic and authoritarian bullies. This isn't just about Ukraine. This is about, Taiwan in the future. But we're dealing with the here and now, and that's why there must be a robust response by democratic nations to constrain this aggression.
And Susan, depending on how big this gets, you're looking at economic ramifications that are going to trickle down to Americans. Already struggling with inflation, it would be higher. Can you talk a little bit about that, but also just the reputation of Joe Biden coming off of a bad withdrawal from Afghanistan and what a bad situation in Ukraine could also mean for him?
Well, I think that's right. This is enormously high stakes decisions that the president is making now and in the coming days. And this crisis, by the way, is likely to go on for quite some time. For President Biden, first of all, the stakes are what does it do to his fortunes inside the US? And I do think the economic consequences of what Americans largely view as a faraway conflict that does not involve them. I don't know, how prepared they are really for the idea that energy prices may further go up, for the idea that some sacrifice is required. Foreign policy has not been at the top of the political agenda. Americans have understandably been inward looking, focused on the pandemic and all of the assorted, enormous fallout inside our society, the unraveling of our own democracy in many ways. And so that's number one. Number two, what about the extreme partisanship with which everything, including foreign policy, has become sort of transformed in recent years in Washington? Are Republicans traditionally willing to be tough on Russia, but now have a leader and an enormous faction in Trump and his supporters who have essentially been pro-Putin in recent years? And so how is that going to affect Biden's ability to speak as the leader of a united country that is divided internally? So I think it's not at all clear what the upside politically for Biden is here, but there's enormous risk for him, both domestically, politically, and internationally. Keeping Europeans on the same page is very difficult. Although I must say, big news this morning, which is Germany canceling the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. That's something that Biden wanted, that Obama and Trump wanted. Never happened until now. So that's a big, big step forward in terms of allied unity against Russia.
Yeah, no, it's a very big step. What do you think, John? I saw you reacting there.
Well, I mean, first of all, Nord Stream 2 is a huge pressure point. It does get to the fact that we need to wean ourselves off these sort of kleptocracies that have, fossil fuel influence on other economies. It's yet another reason to move in that direction. Look, I don't think that at the end of the day, will there be additional economic pressure on Americans and people around the world if we stand up to aggression? Yes. But what the sacrifice that's being requested from people potentially to defend democracy and the liberal international order that has brought in 75 years of peace and prosperity in Europe, something unprecedented in the wake of World War II, that America and its allies helped build. We need to remember that we are not fragile things, that we're not, as Churchill said, made of sugar candy, that dealing with a little bit of difficulty to stand down authoritarianism and autocracy is not too much to ask. We need to straighten and stiffen our spines a little bit.
Can I challenge you on that a little bit, John? I just think that may be the case for some people, but for other people, when they're making tough decisions about whether they can take a certain job because they can't put that gas in their car, or the price of groceries have gone up, and instead of being able to feed their kids ground beef, they have to feed them beans or something else, that is sort of a departure for them from what they would prefer to. That's a lot to ask. How are you expecting people to focus on democracy when the kitchen table issues are eating them up?
Well, I think two things about that, Brie. You're right. Obviously, people are feeling a lot of difficulty, but that's also where government can take action to alleviate some short-term stress. Second of all, I don't think we need to. We run a real risk of taking democracy's gains over really living memory for granted. If people want to live in a 21st century that's dominated by autocrats and autocracies, I think they would very quickly realize that that is a dangerous trade that undermines all the liberties that they have taken for granted in the past. So government has a responsibility to alleviate some of that pain. That's one of the reasons government exists. Susan points out the partisan divide in Washington is troubling. There are, however, a lot of Republicans who are less loud than the isolationist wing, who are willing to back the traditional internationalist role that the U.S. has played. But don't underestimate the trajectory implications of this particular moment. And I know folks are tired. I know they're frustrated. But what we're being asked to do, what we've been asked to do, is far less than other generations have been asked to do. So we should keep that in mind as well. But government should take action to alleviate some of the pressures and pain that people are feeling, because it's real.
Susan, obviously Joe Biden can't control what is out of his control. What is within his control right now?
Well, first of all, I think it's enormously on American presidential leadership. This is a moment. He said when he came into the presidency, "America is back." That was his message to European allies and partners. And interestingly, I think after the struggles of the first year, and both with Afghanistan, there was some feeling among some Europeans that they had not been fully consulted, despite having been with the U.S. for 20 years. There was a rift with the French over the new AUKUS deal with the Australians. And so in a way, those tests, it's probably good they came before this big all-consuming challenge for Biden. I think there's a sense coming out of the big Munich security conference last week that the U.S. actually is back at its seat at the head of the table. There's been enormous effort placed into diplomacy and into being on the same page with allies, preparing these sanctions in advance, sharing intelligence to an unprecedented degree. And so, the Biden administration has doubled down on the idea that America is still capable and willing and able to lead in a 21st century kind of challenge like this. The test is going to be, can he keep it together? Putin is a very experienced adversary. And it seems that he's calibrating many of his moves to maximize the potential for disagreement among the allies. So I think that's going to be a huge challenge for the U.S. is keeping its coalition together over what could be a very, very long run challenge.